those cows that are transiently hypocalcemic on day one have the highest milk production, even compared to the cows that are hypocalcemic. They don't see increased amounts of DA or repro issues comparing it to the normal calcemic cows.
Welcome to the Rumination Podcast presented by Jeff Nutrition. I am your host, Chris Gwyn, and today's discussion will focus on hypocalcemia in dairy cattle. With me today to discuss this topic is Dr. Laura Hernández, professor of lactation physiology, affiliate professor of obstetrics and gynecology, and the vice chair of research and teaching at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Dr. Hernández grew up in El Paso, Texas, completed her BSc and MSc at New Mexico State University and her PhD at University of Arizona with Dr. Robert Collier. After a 3-year postdoc at the University of Cincinnati, where she researched mammary gland development, lactation, and relationship to breast cancer, Dr. Hernández moved to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where she continues her research, teaching, and mentoring of students in lactation biology. Dr. Hernández has received several awards during her career, including the Arthur J. and Ellen A. Maurer Extra Mile Award, the 2022 ADSA Zoetis Physiology Award, and in 2017, the ADSA Foundation Scholar Award in Production. Most recently, Laura has selected by the ADSA, the American Dairy Science Association, as the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Dairy Science. Congratulations on this new editorial role, Dr. Hernández, and welcome to our podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Well, great to have you. Dr. Hernández, could you maybe just share with the audience your journey that brought you to be a trusted researcher and advisor at the University of Wisconsin, starting in Texas and bringing you to Wisconsin?
Sure. Working in Dr. Collier's lab, I had the fortunate pleasure of working in mammary biology. I specifically worked on how the mammary gland interacts with the endocrine and metabolic systems of an animal. And naturally, given his research was in dairy cows, that was my first exposure. And I really became fascinated with this process. So it led me to be a postdoc, continuing this work, but also in humans and in mice. And looking at things more holistically from how the maternal metabolism and biology coordinates with the mammary gland to make milk and stay healthy at the same time. And so when they were looking for a lactation biologist, thank goodness, at the University of Wisconsin in what was originally the dairy science department, but is now the animal and dairy sciences department, I was more than happy to apply for it, and very fortunate to get the position. So I've been here now for 14 years. So most of my work is focused on whether it's in cows or in humans or in mice, on that real interaction during late pregnancy and early lactation. And specifically, I've really been looking at hypocalcemia since the beginning.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about that. But I mean, it's a fascinating subject. We deal every day with dairy ruminants about producing milk. And can we say sometimes we overlook the udder and the physiology and metabolism and that goes on there?
I would say yes.
Yeah, which is kind of strange, but it's awesome that you're in this role and the University of Wisconsin is continuing this role. Because I fear it maybe doesn't exist at a lot of universities, right?
It doesn't, and we're fortunate now we have a second faculty member in the space, Ximena Laporta, and so they really kind of expanded that. And prior to myself getting here, at various periods of time, they had maybe 2 people focused in that space. Occasionally we had someone studying mastitis. Pam Ruegg was here before Michigan State. And so they've always put a focus on that. And it's nice to see that recognized, because if the mammary gland's not active, you're not making milk. And that really is the kind of end game, right? And most research is a lot in dairy, I feel like, focused on nutrition and repro, which clearly important spaces. But if the mammary gland's not working like it should, then you don't really have a reason, right?
You don't. So thank you for hearing that. And so Further on that, we can expand because as I read through your research, it seems that perhaps, and certainly myself included, in the industry in general may have overlooked the key role of the mammary system. And as you pointed, specific to calcium balance or homeostasis in the dairy cow. I'm wondering if you could expand a bit more on that.
Yeah. So I think, maybe 30, 40 years ago, there was more emphasis on this interaction between what was happening in the tissue itself and how that was dealing with nutrition or the endocrine state of the animal. There's been some really great mammary biologists like Jeff Dahl and Dale Bauman and Bob Collier and um, but we've Alan Tucker at Michigan State. But there's been this like space where we've really gone down nutritional management, which is important. But um, as the mammary gland keeps producing milk, it's sending signals back to the cow like I need more. And calcium, of course, is critical because it's the highest mineral content in milk. And the cow needs calcium too to maintain muscle balance and a variety of processes, and that has to do with digestion and function. But it also has to get it into the milk, and so there's always been this pressure evolutionarily, even in the early mammalian species, because they have to be giving it to the baby or the milk production, but they also have to stay alive. And so the mammary glands develop these processes to like secrete hormones or growth factors that drive signaling to the cow, to say we need more calcium and we have to rely on these other factors. And in the case of calcium specifically, it has a lot to do with bone metabolism and pulling calcium from the bone, at least for a good period of time until the cow gets to where she's not in this negative nutritional status or she's achieved peak milk production, where you just can't eat enough calcium to keep up with the demand. And there's not enough limestone to account for that. And the gut can only absorb so fast. And so the bone really has to come in as an added strategy, support system to keep the cow okay. But the signal for that comes from the tissue of the mammary gland. And so that's really where my work has been, not just in calcium, but in general, is like, what is the mammary gland telling the body? How can it regulate itself to maintain both of these biological states?
In some of your discussions you've had is that negative gap in calcium actually extends quite a bit of ways into the lactation, doesn't it?
Yeah. So the most data we have in cows, at least, it's hard to assess bone status in a cow without euthanizing the animal or finding an X-ray or DEXA or micro CT that you could get a cow into. But for sure, the first 30 days in milk, they're losing potentially up to 13% of their bone mass. But it's really not until the animal hits peak lactation where she's not, compensating for this massive amount of milk production and trying to right herself after having given birth, that she gets to this state where she's achieved a steady amount of milk. She knows where she's at, and she's not going to be asking for more. She's going to keep making milk at the same level. And so at that point, they hit, a calcium homeostasis, shall we say. And at that point, having the calcium in the diet is enough to keep up. But prior to that, we just can't quite get enough because of the different processes going on and the amount of milk being put in, it's demanding the calcium.
Yeah, fascinating, and lots to learn and how it may impact our nutrition and management in the years to come. And on that point, I was reading recently, in the last number of years, you and collaborative research have been looking at transient hypocalcemia, we'll call it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if you could expand a bit more on this and what it means to, say, dairy producers or veterinarians or nutritionists.
Sure. This has been an interesting task for my colleague Jess McCart and I, of trying to tell people that a little bit of hypocalcemia is okay, because the common thought is they're hypocalcemic, they're sick, they need more calcium, or they need a bolus, or they need an IV, and something's not right. And there's really these categories and degree of hypocalcemia that can be problematic. But the issue is what stimulates that calcium mobilization from bone is what we call in endocrine world negative feedback. So in keeping things homeostatic, you're at zero, but you're always going +1, -1, +1, -1 constantly, and the average is zero. And you have to get a little, maybe like -0.25, for example, to trigger the hormones to release themselves so that you can drive the calcium mobilization from bone. But you don't want it to be at -0.25 for days or for hours. You don't want it to be -0.75. It's just like a very small level, which we would consider transient. So what her data really solidly shows in an applied way, she had a group of, she's gone through this on several different farms because she approaches things from an epidemiological standpoint, where my experiments are very manipulative, which kind of led us to the same outcome, which was really cool because you don't always see that a very intense set of projects lines up with what the epidemiology says. But in this case, it did. And what she saw was that there were these 4 cohorts of cows. And what we have is the cow that is what we would call normal calcemic always on all days postpartum. And those thresholds are all different. It depends on who you're talking to, what the outcome is. Is it DA? Is it pregnancy per AI? Is it inflammation? But, you could pick your method there, but they're always going to have a normal calcemia at all levels postpartum. They might decrease from where they were prepartum, but they never get into that subclinical threshold. There's a second group of cows that we call transient hypocalcemia, and what she classifies this as is a subclinical cow 1 day postpartum. But by 4 days postpartum, she's normal. Then there's a third group of cows that we call the delayed, or she classifies as a delayed hypocalcemic cow that is normal calcemic at day 1, but subclinical by day 4. And those cows often don't fare well. And then there's this cow that's persistently hypocalcemic, and she's low on day 1 and on day 4. So she can't quite get her endocrine status stimulated and get the mobilization process going. And what we saw in her data, and she's seen this like in several data sets now, are that those cows that are transiently hypocalcemic on day 1 have the highest milk production, even compared to the cows that are hypocalcemic. And they don't see increased amounts of DA or repro issues comparing it to the normal calcemic cows. The delayed and the persistently hypocalcemic cows are the ones that have problems both in terms of disease as well as milk production issues. And so what we both hypothesize, and I was seeing this in all of my very intensive studies, no matter what we were feeding with prepartum, if we were doing infusions of calcium, if we were giving whatever the manipulation was, we were seeing a similar phenomenon, that you needed a level of decrease in calcium that did not last long and that was early to stimulate the process. You didn't want it late, you didn't want to have long hypocalcemia, and you didn't want to have severe hypocalcemia. And if you did that, those cows would be better off. So that all came together the same for both of us in different ways. The other thing that I saw in my data where we were doing a lot of manipulations was that when we gave cows calcium for 24 hours postpartum, and we didn't allow them the ability to drop their calcium from prepartum, the cows that were on a negative DCAD diet, so they already had a dietary intervention to be healthy, that benefit went away because those cows then had a blockage in their ability to drop their calcium at calving that needed to happen. And when we stopped giving them the calcium 24 hours later, they still dropped their calcium, and it was worse than it was if they'd just done it naturally. And what this told me was that you have to let them have their hypocalcemic, in quotation marks, event postpartum in order to trigger the right biology to occur so that they can make milk and stay healthy. And so now there's, questions surrounding how you should treat animals. What are the appropriate for producers? Like, what's the order of operations? And what do we do? Because everyone just wants their cows to be okay. Like, the transition cow is the trickiest cow, and what I'd argue the cow we should invest in, because she's the one that needs to make all the milk, and she's having a calf. So especially prepartum, we tend not to put a lot in them because they're not making milk. It's an economic decision. And what I would say is prevention is key. Like, I don't want to go to the doctor if I'm really sick. I want to make sure I stay healthy. That's the number one goal. And that's how I approach this. So we do that largely with DCAD. The new thing that's being used more regularly are these zeolite clays. The zeolite clay specifically, though, seems to work to bind phosphorus, which does improve hypocalcemia, but the biology is different. And we're still trying to tease out all of those actions, because I think the best thing we can do for farmers is give them all the information and all the data so that they know how to manage the animal in the event something bad happens. Because what you might do for a negative DCAD cow that gets sick could be different for an exolate cow that gets sick, because while they achieve calcium, they don't do it in necessarily the same way.
Okay. Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Yeah. And serotonin, you've done some work on that. Is there a play in there for these transition cows as well? These hypocalcemia?
Yes. So this is just another, what I hope becomes a tool in the toolbox. But what we've shown, this is an area I've been working on for a long time. And what we've seen, at least with our data, is that the precursor to serotonin, 5-HTP or 5-hydroxytryptophan, it will trigger a hypocalcemia that then allows for those negative feedback events to start.
Okay.
And so it does it in a slightly different way than either the DCAD or the exolate. And we've been working to piece all those things together over the last 14 years. And I'm hoping one day it'll be another method in what farmers have as an ability to use, depending on what their system is, because everybody's system is a little different. Organic, milking, grazing, and they have to do what's best for their farm. And I think that's, one thing I'd like to say is that we have a lot of tools, and having more tools are better because it gives farmers more options on how to manage animals to the best of their ability, given their, the system that they're using to care for their cows.
No, absolutely, because the science biology is there, but it still has to be applied at the farm level.
Right.
Right. These products need to be mixed properly. They need to be consumed, delivered, etc. Mm-hmm. Where's the research going on hypocalcemia after this, do you think?
That's a great question. I think some of what we're doing is getting more details together on the exolate end, because this is newer in the US. Mm-hmm. They had been doing it in Europe for a while, although it's evolving even since then, but now here, and trying to understand that to gather more information. I think that's one way. I think the other thing is trying to understand how all these different preventative methods work. When do you give a bolus? When do you give a gel? How do those things work in combination with these prepartum therapies? Because I think there's a real gap in that knowledge. Like, how do they all work together, and could they be pushing against each other? Could you be more judicious in when you do things that might allow them to work better? I think those are some of the big ones, and how I think potentially too, and it depends on how things go. I know in the US, they tend to keep herds at a younger age. But I also think personally that we could keep our animals longer. And the longer a cow is in the herd, the more likely she is to have these issues. And that's been one way people have gotten around it, is keeping them younger. In all the herds here at least. And I think that might change in how we care for our animals. So I think that's another thing that could come up. And there might be some interactions, I don't know, and it seems to be that everyone's exploring interactions between what's happening with methane or emissions or efficiency, like the intersection of like climate and efficiency on the farms. Because certainly with the exolate product, like it binds phosphorus, and that might impact like phosphorus excretion, which is definitely could be an environmental concern. Don't know that it is, but I think those are all things we have to figure out, because this intersectionality of the whole farm is really important, and we tend to stay isolated in all these little buckets. But really it's how all the pieces work together.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. So as we kind of wind down, we always like to try and highlight some of the key things that a producer or veterinary nutritionist can do at the farm level to bring these ideas and research to a practical level. What would you share as the, say, top 3 take-homes when it comes to hypocalcemia in cows, what we know today?
Manage your cows prepartum. Pick your poison, whether it's exolate or decad. I highly encourage that because they work. And I would say figure out what works best and do it right. Because if you can prevent it, it's better than having to treat a cow. So I think that's one. The other one is that I don't think we need to be blood testing cows daily for the first week postpartum. I think if you're really concerned about how a herd's doing, maybe on a larger scale, try to get samples. If you're only going to do it once, wait 48 hours, unless you see a sick animal. Always treat a sick animal. But if you're going to get in there once to kind of look at how things are going postpartum, that's a good benchmark to know whether they've hit their nadir or not. But I don't think you need to be testing them all the time, which is something people have been doing a lot for a long time. And I think sometimes the cow just needs to be left alone. She might do better that way, unless, again, she's sick. And then third, I think the other thing is that getting all the knowledge of the different treatments and preventions there are and understanding them is really important. As a nutritionist or a veterinarian, know the biology, because without your knowledge, you could be doing something that you don't need to be doing if you don't know how they work. And that's why the research is really important, that we do these really intense projects and also epidemiological projects, so that we can give the farmers and the producers and veterinarians and the nutritionists the knowledge they need so that they can apply things more thoroughly.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for those clear, practical applications that we need to think about. Always never forget the biology for what's going on. It's kind of important.
The cow will tell you.
Well, thank you. I want to thank our audience for being with us today. Don't forget to subscribe to the Rumination Podcast on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or other platforms, and feel free to visit Gwyn.Ca for more information. This podcast was brought to you by Gwyn Nutrition, precision nutrition for a growing world.